Welcome to CTV News Trendline with Michael Stittle and Nik Nanos.
Nick, why does everything always happen when we're on break?
Yeah, that's the way the news works. It's not like compound interest. It's clumpy. Stuff happens, and in this case, a lot of stuff has happened since over the break.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing your latest ballot tracking numbers and how Trudeau's announcement that he's resigning as Liberal leader, whether that's had any impact.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Conservatives have been having a very comfortable double-digit lead for quite a long time. Like not last August, the August before that. And what we saw over the holiday break, at least, were the Conservatives ramp up what was a 10, 15, 20-point advantage into a whopping 27-point advantage just leading into the week before Justin Trudeau decided to step down as both Prime Minister and leader of the Liberals, or announce his resignation. And, check out the change over the last couple of weeks, though. Now, so Justin Trudeau steps down, and now what we have is the Conservatives at around 42%, down from 47. The Liberals at around 25. They're up. That's actually the big movement over the last while. It Conservatives numbers going down and the Liberal numbers going up. NDP at 18, Bloc at 7, Green at 6, People's Party after that about 1-2%. But the big movement in the post-Justin Trudeau world is a little bit of negative pressure on the Conservative numbers and a little bit of upward movement for the Liberals. But we got to say, Michael, Conservatives still have a very comfortable advantage. And if they hold on to 42%, it's still a majority government.
Nick, you've also said in the past that when a party does not have a leader, that weirdly they see a bump in support. We saw the same thing with the Conservatives when Aaron O'Toole resigned. Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with Justin Trudeau resigning and the vacancy that he has created. What happens is that when a party does not have a leader, there is nothing to repel people specifically. Why don't we just say general repellents, but not specific repellents? So in this particular case, people would be looking at the Liberal Party and they say, well, perhaps Chrystia Freeland could be the leader. Perhaps Mark Carney could be the leader. Perhaps Karina Gould could be the leader. They see individuals like that and they project onto the party, and the numbers go up a little bit. And that's actually what we're seeing now. Once the Liberals select a leader, then we'll actually have the real numbers in terms of whether there's any real bounce to make the Liberals a little more competitive with the Conservatives than they have been over the last year and a half.
Nick, at certain points last year, the Liberals and the NDP were nearly neck and neck, and now the NDP is sort of falling into third place ballot tracking wise. Do you see this as a trend, and what does this mean for their leader, Jagmeet Singh?
Well, it's definitely got to be worrisome for the New Democrats and for Jagmeet Singh. The thing is that when the NDP and the Liberals are in about the same zone, that's good news because at least for the New Democrats, because it shows that they're a potential alternative. And, under Tom Mulcair and Jack Layton, the NDP were ahead of the Liberals because, for those progressive voters, one of the factors for them is who could they strategically vote for in order to block the Conservatives. And I think for Jagmeet Singh and the New Democrats, if they're at 18, like 16, 17, 18%, it's not good news for him because it won't be the breakthrough that people were hoping that his leadership would have provided. And it also means that come the election, if the NDP are at 18 now, come the election, perhaps it might be a little lower if some of those New Democrats decide to vote Liberal in order to try to stop the Conservatives in some of these tighter races.
Nick, ballot tracking is one thing, but how it translates into seat projections is quite another. What can you say about that?
Well, the latest seat projections for Nanos, and we also include the ridings that are too close to call. We don't declare those ridings based on the modeling. But when you look at the top number, the Conservatives are firmly in the driver's seat. We have 164 ridings declared as a win For the Conservatives, based on the latest Nanos tracking, 51 declared as winners for the Liberals. Bloc at 40, NDP at 14. But there's still, Michael, 51 ridings and another 30 ridings, or 81 ridings in total, that are too close to call, which means the margin is razor thin at 2%, or between 2 to 4%. So still some room for movement. And I think the big question is going to be those bloc numbers and the Liberal numbers, how those ridings might break, and whether the separation or the way the races pan out could put the bloc into the opposition. So anything can really happen right now, but in terms of who could be second. But when it comes to who's at the top of the heap, it's Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, with a very comfortable, over 100-seat advantage in declared wins over the Liberals.
So, Nik, do you think, is it fair to say that until we have a new Liberal leader, that these numbers can change a lot, and we won't really get a clear sense of the picture until we know who's leading that party?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we'll get a sense of whether the numbers will change once we know who will be leading the Liberal Party of Canada. Now, whether they do change is a different story, but right now, at least, what we're seeing is a little bit of a tightening. But let's face it, politics is a lot like the stock market. The stock market has overvalued stocks. I don't know if anybody has Nvidia shares, but they took a hit yesterday, 20% hit, with the announcement of another AI competitor that doesn't need those special chips. So think of it this way. The Conservatives, with a 27-point advantage, if they were able to maintain that, that would have been an extremely exceptional thing for them to do, and very difficult for them to do. They don't need a 27-point advantage to win a comfortable majority. So now that we're seeing a little bit of pressure on the Conservative support, what we're probably getting into is the area of the real advantage. And my guess, Michael, is that the real advantage for the Conservatives is probably someplace between 10 and 20% over the Liberals, not necessarily 27%.
I've also noticed, Nik, that the leading Liberal contenders, let's say Freeland, Gould, Carney, that they are sort of running against their own party's past policies, let's say, the carbon tax and all that stuff. So I'm not sure how Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has a plan in place to attack what he doesn't know what the policies will be. Does that I don't know if I'm making sense, but
Yeah.
I feel like it's sort of in a holding pattern right now.
Well, you can imagine how Justin Trudeau's feeling, all the work that he's been doing over the last number of years, and things like the carbon tax and the capital gains tax being thrown overboard. There's such a thing as a policy boat or ship being thrown overboard by the top contenders for the Liberal leadership. And I don't know. I guess what they're trying to do is to make sure that the election is not about those things, which has irritated a number of Canadians. But they have to risk alienating or disappointing Canadians, especially progressive Canadians that supported the capital gains change, supported the carbon tax. They probably feel betrayed by this group of Liberal potential leadership contenders. And so I guess the big question, Michael, is if you're a progressive and you like the carbon tax and stuff like that, you're probably thinking, would you rather have a Liberal government or a Conservative government? Are you going to punish the Liberals for flip-flopping? Or are you so worried about a potential Conservative win that you're going to hold your nose and vote Liberal, even though they might have reversed themselves on some policies? We don't know how that's going to pan out. But, right now, at least for the Liberals, they're changing some of their major platforms in order to take them off the table so that the election is not about these irritants. So why don't we just say carbon tax election out the door, tax on capital gains probably out the door too, and the Liberals wanting not to fight the next federal election on those issues.
Nik, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll look at some startling numbers on how Canadians feel about our international reputation.
Super.
Nik, you have been tracking for, correct me if I'm wrong, 18 years how Canadians feel about our reputation internationally, and you have some shocking news.
Yeah. For the last 18 years, every year we would ask about how Canadians feel about Canada's international reputation, whether they think that it's improved or not improved over the past year. And 4%, Michael, count it 4, that's less than 1 out of every 20, believe that our international reputation has improved over the past year. Another 6% think that it's somewhat improved. But check out those negative numbers. The proportion of Canadians that think that it has outright not improved or somewhat not improved, more than 2 out of every 3 say that it's gotten worse. And let's face it, we've been a punching bag for Donald Trump on the international stage. Him talking about Canada being the 51st state, him basically engaging in a tariff war or slapping tariffs on Canadian goods. Not good for the Canadian reputation. So just think, Canada's basically become a target. Why don't we just say Donald Trump's favorite target, favorite punching bag? It seems like every time he has a press conference and he talks about tariffs, we're at the top of the list, and the numbers reflect that. The other thing that's quite important, this is the worst score on record for our international reputation and whether it's improved or not in 18 years. Not good.
That is even lower than when Stephen Harper was in his last year as Prime Minister.
Exactly. And, this speaks to the fact that, Stephen Harper's focused a lot on domestic politics, especially at the beginning of his mandate. But, these numbers don't bode well. It's kind of like you look at the numbers for the previous government, what they look like before they lost, and this is looking very similar, at least on the international reputation front.
I remember when Harper was sort of, disengaging, and maybe it's fair to say, with the United Nations, and Justin Trudeau was campaigning to re-engage with the United Nations, get us back on the UN Security Council. He was, traveling around the world meeting international leaders, and according to this, it feels like Canadians believe he failed.
Yep. Maybe I could say more than yep. He had some do we want to call it a wardrobe malfunction in India? I don't know. I think for the Indians, it was a wardrobe malfunction, and tension in relations with India, tension with relations with China over the detention of the 2 Michaels and all that kind of stuff. Now we're back to, not great, why don't we just say cordial, but not optimal relations with the new administration. So they have been cordial. Like, let's face it, he did go to Mar-a-Lago, had a steak probably, and chit chat with Donald Trump, but we haven't seen that convert into positivity. So they have been cordial, but just not as positive as Canadians would have hoped. So think, our relationship with the United States going through some turbulence, our relationship with India and China under strain. Those are like the 3 biggest economies. So, not a lot of great news on that front.
Nik, here in Canada, we're seeing political leaders take, different approaches to Donald Trump. Obviously, it's a big question for the next, whoever is Prime Minister after the next federal election as well. Some, like Doug Ford, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, clearly see it as a vote winner.
Yeah, which is why, Ontario is kind of gearing up and will have an election. And the Premier Doug Ford telegraphed last week that the election was coming in Ontario, and he has put the Canada-US relationship as the key reason why he wants. Like, this guy's got a pretty good, strong mandate in at Queen's Park. Like, it's not even close. But he wants an even stronger mandate in order for him to participate and support dealing with the Trump administration and potential tariffs that the Trump administration might slap onto Canada. So he obviously sees it as a vote winner. And the thing is that he doesn't need to have an election until 2026. So I'm sure he's hoping that it works out. They have a significant advantage. The Progressive Conservatives in Ontario have a significant advantage over the Liberals. But got to remember David Peterson, that guy, Liberal premier in the 1990s, called an early election. He was leading in the polls by a country mile. and got thumped by some, at that time, very bookish looking guy with thick glasses named Bob Ray, the New Democrats, who had a smash and grab victory because people were upset about, at that time in the 1990s, what they thought was an unnecessary election. So Ford's probably looking to avoid that, but it's got to be careful. It's got to be careful.
Never underestimate a guy with thick glasses, Nick. That's what I think.
Yeah, right. There you go.
We've seen the we've seen the opposite strategy in Alberta with Premier Danielle Smith, where she's sort of taking this, let cooler heads prevail. We need our energy exports to the U.S. To continue strategy. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's very good domestically for Danielle Smith in Alberta, and it's what Albertans want. Like, let's face it, she's there to advocate for Alberta. Her job is not to advocate for Canada. In the same way that, for the premiers, their primary responsibility is to the voters in their province and to their provincial economy. So not a big surprise. I think, it's interesting in work that we've done before with CTV suggests that Canadians are more likely to want the provincial premiers and the federal government to work together cooperatively, like a Team Canada response. So, could this provide an opportunity for Donald Trump to create a bit of a wedge within the Canadian delegation, because Alberta is the energy superpower within the Federation when it comes to oil and gas, and for him to play off the Premier of Alberta against the other premiers and whoever happens to be the Prime Minister at the time while they're doing the negotiation. Don't know, but it's good politics for her from a provincial perspective. Maybe not as good for Canada, but that's the reality of what we're in right now.
Nick, finally, any words of advice for the next prime minister in dealing with U.S. President Donald Trump?
Well, first of all, don't be a weakling. Donald Trump has a certain amount of respect for, maybe he doesn't like, but he has a respect for tough negotiators. So, us looking weak would not be good. That's why, basically for Justin Trudeau, he's the wrong person to deal with Donald Trump. Even though he was successful in Justin Trudeau's first mandate and Donald Trump's first mandate in getting the trade deal, I think Donald Trump sees Justin Trudeau as a bit of a lame duck, which he is, having resigned. I think the problem for the next prime minister is to basically have a strategy to say, listen, we're important to each other. Canada is important to the United States. The US is important to Canada. Our first preference would be not to have tariffs, to try to work things out. But if necessary, we will have to respond in one way or another. But we don't know. Maybe it's going to be kind of like Colombia, Michael, right? Because he threatened, Trump had those planes with people that he wanted to return. The Colombians initially didn't want to accept them, even though under Biden they had an agreement. And he threatened tariffs, and then they worked something out. So maybe tariffs is the big stick that he wants to threaten countries with in order to negotiate on other things. And, if that's the case, that is a valid negotiating position for the Americans. And for Canada, we just have to figure out how the negotiations will work and how we can protect our interests so that the binational relationship remains strong and positive.
Nick, I think that's it for this episode. As always, thanks very much.
Okay, bye-bye.